Well, we are invited to this dynamic adventure of life. Isn't that right? And yes, that is. And while we are on the journey, I think an important question needs to be made. How can create spaces of vulnerability to help reduce anxiety in leaders? And everybody here is a leader at some point. If you're overseeing 10, 20, 30 people, or if you're a mother, that you're leading some dynamics at home. And I think each one of us struggle with anxiety. I was 19 years ago, and yeah. I was co-leading 600 people, and I had an anxiety disorder. That was very painful, but it was rewarding. And you're going to get to know why. I don't know if you know, but in terms of prevalence, Brazil leads anxiety disorders in the world. We are talking here about more than 18 million people. It means 9.3% of the population of the country. So when I think about my story, and when I think about these numbers, a question that comes to mind, what are good news for these people? And when I think about these numbers, I see leaders there. Leaders, people, mothers, leaders in non-profit organizations, companies that are helping other people to take a step forward. So when I see these numbers, I ask a question, what are the good news and what can we do related to this situation? So there are three factors that are really important that we get to know. The first one, some studies have shown that mid-rank leaders compared to high-rank leaders, they have more levels of non-salutary cortisols when compared to the high-rank leaders. Do you know why? Because they manage people directly. So it means that sometimes in their brain, instead of thinking, I am a boss of X number of people, they think, I have X number of bosses. And this kind of relationships just is a trigger for anxiety. Another thing, a survey that was published related to millennials showed that this generation now, it's a way higher, a great deal more exposed to anxiety than the previous generations. Why? This desire for success, this desire for money, this desire for achieving. And talking about achieving, a very interesting study of Harvard when they're asking, how can people live healthier and better? They're responding that sometimes we're so focused in achieving, but we are not invest time in connecting. So with these responses, so if you're just thinking about achieving, and we say that a 75-year-old study show us that deep connections are so important to our brain, to our lives, to our hearts, what are we going to do? So remember that I mentioned that I was going through in the past an anxiety disorder? The hardest thing that time was the feeling that I could not share this with anyone. That I had to be quiet because this means shame. You are weak. So thinking about that situation, and I came to a point that I could not handle anymore. I had to sit down to someone, and some people say, hey, I need to talk openly about the situation that I'm facing. And I can tell you, that was healing for me. Share about some irrational thoughts, that feeling that I could not step out of bed, being a leader, but facing and struggling with that idea that if I leave the door, somebody would threaten me. I mean, totally irrational thoughts. But I was stuck in that. So vulnerability for me became such a powerful thing because it was healing. But not only vulnerability, together with the most important teachings of the Master Jesus about anxiety, brought a very, very interesting experience to my life. Because of that experience and also the teachings of the Master Jesus, I started inviting people to what I call the journey of vulnerability through the anxiety funnel. I know it sounds a little bit weird sometimes, but this is just a picture to invite people to a journey. It's not to mean, I didn't mean to create a 3-step method. It is just an idea to create a situation to share life with people. And the purpose of this dynamic is really to invite people to a very powerful environment where people can live life to the fullest. No shame, no tags, but this place together, we can share life together. But before talking a little bit more about the funnel, I would like to see and check with you the teachings of our Master Jesus related to anxiety. When he was talking to his disciples, first he said, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body or what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and body more than clothes?" What Jesus was asking or telling the disciples here is, hey, wait a minute. You guys are anxious because you inverted values, the core values. Hey, let's just remind you guys that body is more than food, not the idea that food is more than body. Or, in clothes more than body and food more than life. They were just messing up things. And when we tend to invert values of our life, we tend to be anxious. And then he keeps the conversation and he says, "Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they?" Try to just focus in the dynamics that you have been facing in terms of anxiety. Sometimes in the root, it really means some identity issues because we forgot our true identity. He's inviting here, look at the birds, the air, and you are going to see that, hey, wait a minute, you're way more valuable than there. And we forget this. And then he keeps the conversation going, and he says, "Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life?" He's just drawing our attention. Hey, wait a minute. You are not a superhero. And sometimes when we are leading situations in our life, we do believe that we can add 1 hour to our clock. Am I wrong? We do believe that. And sometimes we go into battles that are higher than our capacity because we do believe that we can add 1 hour to the clock. And it's interesting because we love at some point to be the hero of the day or save the day. And that's why sometimes we get stuck in one of these situations. Now let's go back to the funnel. Remember that? Well, we say the journey of vulnerability through this anxiety funnel because it relates somehow to these dynamics. And it's a funnel because it's wider at the top and it's narrow at the bottom. And if you see and if you look to these situations in people that live around us, this is exactly what happened. We start to get stuck in the middle of this journey because one of these situations or others, but just mention these three. And I started to invite the people to talk and to share life around these dynamics. So, what we do first, we get people together, leaders together in a place. It can be nonprofit, it can be church, it can be, I run a business, so I do this with my team as well. So the first thing that we do the opening round, where we set some ground rules. We are not here to fix anyone. We are not here to tell someone a very good thing that needs to change the life of that person. And we are not here to judge anyone. And the second thing that we do there, before starting the rounds, we say, thinking about the word that Jesus uses there, worry, the Greek word is to be divided into parts, to feel scattered. This is exactly the way we feel when we are anxious, isn't that right? So in this opening round, we ask people, what is dividing you into parts? I mean, do you think is that easy? So you have that silence, right? Everybody looking at each other saying, who is going to be the first one to risk here? But it's interesting because, and we ask this question because we want to invite people to verbalize what they're facing. Because there is power and healing through the words of a person when they speak out loud, when they voice their anxiety and the reason of the anxiety. So people start sharing, and then we start asking them, how are you feeling about this? Because we want to invite people to create a sense of connection, share feelings. And also we ask, how is your body responding to this? Create self-awareness. And it's so interesting because you start seeing people. This day here was a very, very powerful day because, we started and people started sharing. And when they were sharing, at first you saw that very heavy environment where people were so tired. But they started saying, what divided me into parts is, and they started verbalizing and giving names to those giants. Then, after this, we go to this part of the inversion of values, the core values of life. So we ask questions such as, what are the beliefs you were holding to that is making you a hostage? Yeah, it's like this. Sometimes beliefs and thoughts kidnaps us in the middle of the day and we become hostage of these thoughts. And then we keep asking them, what priorities, core values, do you see this belief is inviting you to invert? And then, what is God? Or when we're dealing, as I told you, I run a business, I don't use the word God there, but it was the greater power, or this inner voice is inviting you to do. And it's incredible how they start to respond to this. Talking to a supervisor of a pharmaceutical company in Brazil. And we were he was sharing about his challenges and also his struggles in a situation there. And through this dynamic, he could see here that, hey, wait a minute. Is it really because I am facing this big challenge? Or the way I see myself is making me a hostage to this process? And this is what leads us to the next part, that is in identity issues. And it was so powerful to see that person saying, hey, this is not a big challenge the way I was thinking it is. It's the way I see myself in the midst of this challenge that it's making so difficult. It's so good to see people going back to their true identity. It's so good to see people, leaders, people that are leading processes and people in their workplace or church or nonprofit or family, just going back to the place that we're supposed to be because they are realigning identity and core values. And to finish, I would like to share here another part. We divide people in small groups. And when we divide them in small groups, they start to see what are the zones of damage that is a result of the superhero complex. And it's so good to see people seeing that. And that was totally unconscious. They could not see themselves. And this day here was so powerful that someone said, hey, wait a minute. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to control all things. I'm trying just to make things work in a way that this is destroying me and my family. And it's so important to see, look what this person said this day. It's so important to see that I'm not the only crazy person here. And she started weeping, saying, hey, this is place of restoring my soul. Because when I arrived here, I thought everybody had a perfect life. But after you shared all these messy things, I saw that we are on the same page. And you know what I see? That I'm leaving this place a way better and strong enough to face what I need to face when I leave this room. Do you know what is this? This is the power of vulnerability. This is the power of opening our hearts and inviting people to open theirs. As leaders, as people that are leading people, they need to see this in our lives. And in the finishing round, do you know what the people say? This is healing for me. This was remarkable. This was powerful. And for me, the best word is that they keep saying, this was alignment. This was alignment. Alignment. And if you see at the end of the speech of the Master Jesus, he says, seek the kingdom and righteousness. If you see righteousness in a broader sense, it means what? Alignment. Alignment. And this is what we're inviting people for as a result of vulnerability. This is what helps me made through in life. Better saying, I say that this is what keeps helping me making through. The space of vulnerability. And I really like to invite people to this journey because we see that as a result of this dynamic of the spaces of vulnerability, they see themselves in a different perspective. They see others in a different perspective. No shame. And you see that it's tangible, this idea of kingdom and life. Would you like to invite people as well? Because it's not going to just be good for people. It's going to be good for you too. Because we can find God, Jesus, and inner voice, whatever they want to call, as a result of this connection. And we can see ourselves, people, and situations in a different way. Thank you.